Good morning. Hope you had a great evening. Good night's sleep. I wanted to do my 5 minute study with you before I got into my daily chores. I want to start off by first of all making a statement. Many times people ask me, what do the commandments of God mean to you? What are they? And I want to start off by saying, first of all, that to me, the commandments of God, as given at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments and others, is a way in which I understand the kind of lifestyle that God asks me to follow. The lifestyle that He's asking me to do is to love Him with all my heart, with my whole being, and to love my neighbor as myself. That is the expression of what the commandments of God are asking me to do. And by doing them, I'm actually committing myself to be a follower of Christ, to be a follower of the way, to imitate Christ, to do His Father's will. If I had to be a slave to anybody, I choose to be a slave of the Father, of our Father in heaven. I want to go to certain scriptures to back this thought today. Romans chapter 6, Paul is speaking, and he's making certain statements there, but I want to particularly go to verse 16. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone to obey him as slaves, you are slaves to the one whom you obey? If keeping the commandments is an expression of who I follow, or who I belong to, or who I'm slave to, then that's what I should do. And here Paul is saying that. You will be a slave to the one who you obey. Jesus then makes some very interesting statements. In John chapter 14, Jesus in verse 15 says, if you love me, you will obey what I command. It's interesting. Jesus is saying, if you accept me as your king, you will keep my commandments. Then he says in John chapter 13, verse 34, a new commandment I give you. Here we see that Jesus is asking us to be slaves to a certain lifestyle. A new commandment I give to you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. Jesus is saying here that I want you to love one another as I have loved you. If you want to imitate me, if you want to follow me, if you want to be an example as I was an example of the Father's love, then love one another as I've loved you. Then he says, all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Dear friends, I want you to understand that keeping the commandments of God is not just about, following rigid laws. It's an expression, first of all, that you love somebody, and secondly, that you have chosen to be a follower of that particular person. And I want you to notice something else. Jesus has a very interesting dialogue in John chapter 8 with regards to the Pharisees and Sadducees, who claimed very strongly to be followers of God. And by doing this, they claimed to have been children of Abraham. Jesus said to them in John chapter 8, verse 31, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Jesus is saying to them, if you do what I tell you to do, you will be my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves to anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Here Jesus is saying to them, hey, hang on, I want you to get something clear. If you listen to the teachings of somebody, you are a follower of that person, a slave to that person's particular teachings. They rebel against this. They say, we have never been slaves to anybody else. We are Abraham's descendants. Jesus responds in verse 34 by saying, I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Exactly what Paul says. And here the Pharisees are claiming to be followers of Abraham, but they are slaves to sin. And I will explain it to you. He says further, verse 37, I know you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are ready to kill me because you have no room for my word. So here we find out that Jesus senses what's going on in their hearts, and he says, you are plotting to kill me. And yet you claim to be Abraham's descendants. You claim to be children of Abraham, but Abraham would never have done this. That's what he says. He says further, if you were Abraham's children, then you would do the things Abraham did. As it is, you are determined to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did no such thing. Now remember that Paul actually says about Abraham, and we read this in various places, that Abraham believed God, that he followed God. When God told him to come out of the land of Ur where he had been, he came out of there. He followed God. He listened to God's instructions. It was very clear that Abraham had chosen to be a disciple of God. The interesting thing here that we also pick up, that a sign that he was obedient to God, that he was a slave to God, that he was in love with God, was the sign of circumcision. I then want to go on to show something further. He says there, if God were your father, you would love me, for I came from God and now am here. I've not come on my own, but he sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. So it's interesting here that we pick up very clearly that Jesus is saying that by your lifestyle you express who you follow, who you serve. I want to end off this study by just turning to the commandments of God found in Exodus chapter 20. And God says very clearly there, if you shall have no other gods before me. I'm doing this for a reason. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters below. Then Jesus says, through the Father says through Jesus, verse 5, you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Here he is saying something very clear. Have no images, make no images, and do not bow down and serve them. Now let's just finish off. Daniel chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar establishes a statue, an image made entirely of gold, places it in the land of Dura, and then he says to all his officials, all those in charge, all those in command, I want you to come, and when the music plays, I want you to bow down and worship. Listen to what he says there. As soon as you hear, this is Daniel chapter 3 verse 5. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. I'm going to carry on with this tomorrow. But I want you to know that this story here is very relevant to us living in the time we're doing in. It's going to be a challenge to find out who you really serve. Do you love God and keep his commandments, or are there other gods that you follow? Choose wisely today whom you will worship. May God bless you today.